Thank you for joining tonight's City
This
of
conference
Trinidad.
will now be recorded.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks for joining tonight's City of Trinidad community meeting. The subject of the meeting is the city's application to the Environmental Protection Agency requesting funding to clean up the hazardous substances within the Fox West Theater. The agenda for the meeting will be introductions and purpose, followed by a presentation on the Brownfield background, the Fox West cleanup grant, next steps. And then we will have time for any questions and discussion. Hosting the meeting tonight are myself, Georgie Clark, Planning Administrator for the city, and Carrie Racky, Project Consultant with Stantec Consulting Services. Carrie is our expert consultant who has assisted the city in utilization of our current EPA assessment grant over the last 4 years. And she has prepared the application for the cleanup grant for the Fox West Theater. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to share our plans to apply for an EPA cleanup grant for the Fox West Theater and to gather community input. But before we begin, I have a few housekeeping items. During the presentation, all microphones will be muted. You can type your questions in the chat box and we will respond during the Q&A section. If you would like to speak during this time, please type your name in the chat box and we will call on you. So with that said, I'll turn the presentation over to Carrie Racky.
Thanks, Georgie.
You're welcome.
So I'll start off with just kind of an introduction, what I call Brownfields 101, just to kind of familiarize people with this terminology. What is a brownfield and why are we calling the Fox Theater and other sites in Trinidad a brownfield? The EPA has their definition here. It's property where expansion, redevelopment, or reuse is complicated by the presence or suspected presence of contamination. So really it can be any property that's not living up to its potential, potentially because there's contamination, or even dilapidation and vacancy can create perceptions of contamination and can be barriers to redevelopment of a property. They can turn off investment and redevelopment. So EPA has a brownfield grant program to deal with sites like this. They've had this annual competition for grant funds every year since the 1990s. It's a really popular program. It's bipartisan. It's got as much to do with economic development as it has to do with environmental cleanup a lot of the time. So it's just been really popular all over the country. EPA offers a few different types of brownfield grants. They offer grants that are for assessment, so basically for taking samples at a property to see if there's contamination there, and if so, how much. They offer separate grants just for cleanup, and they offer every other year they have a grant called a multi-purpose grant that allows you to do both assessment and cleanup with the same pot of money. But they only offer 10 of those nationwide. Every other year. The assessment and cleanup grants they offer every year. It's a really competitive program. They get a lot of applications. It's a 10-page narrative application, so it takes a lot of time. It asks for a lot of detail about conditions in the community and at the properties where you're interested in spending the money. So it's a very competitive program. And if you want to learn more, I've put the EPA's website there so you can check out some of the detail. They have a lot of fact sheets and that kind of thing on their website. Brownfields, I think a lot of times is kind of a 4-letter word. People don't want their property to
Carrie, your screen is frozen. The joys of virtual meetings here. Well, let's see if Carrie can maybe reconnect. I'm going to try calling her and see if I can connect with her.
Is she not able to get back on? Okay, let's see.
Do you want to phone in and let's see if we can get the PowerPoint clear? Okay. Okay, I'll see if Victor can get that up for me. Okay. Yeah, let me get it for you. Okay, I'm sorry, everybody. Carrie's computer froze up, so she's going to call in. I'm not sure if we'll get the PowerPoint presentation up, but we're going to try, so bear with us.
You can go ahead and just present, Georgie.
Okay. Okay, Victor, I've got this PowerPoint up. How do we do it? Can you put that on my...
Did you accept it when I put on there?
Hi, Victor. Carrie's here.
Hi. We're just trying to get set up here. Just a second, okay?
Okay.
Okay, now can you come share the PowerPoint presentation?
Let's see. Okay, so you're going to be sharing this.
Not that one, that's my email.
Oh, this one?
So,
Let's do this one.
well, that's,
Where's the present?
shrink, open that up. Yeah. No, that shouldn't be it. Let me find it, it was open.
Who's that?
This one right there.
We can share that one. No. Oh, okay. Let me look at it. No.
I just tried to email it to you guys again if you need it. It's big though, so I don't know if it'll come through.
Okay, I think we've got it up. It's
Yeah.
Victor.
You're gonna have to change. You're gonna have to do that.
How do I get out of that?
Just have to leave that.
How do I change it? I did
Page slide.
Oh, okay.
So you just have to go up and down like that.
Okay.
Go ahead.
let's do Carrie.
Carrie. Carrie, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, Carrie, can you see my screen?
So I'm just I didn't try to get on the online thing. So if you just want to tell me what screen to start on.
Okay, I'll try and keep up with you. We're on the brownfields equals opportunities and resources.
Okay, good. Did you hear anything I said about this slide or?
I think you need to start with this one again.
Okay. So should I launch now?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Thank you for being patient, everyone. Sorry as we kind of figure out technology. So I was saying that brownfields can have kind of a negative connotation. People don't want to think that they own a brownfield or that their communities have brownfields in them, but all communities do. And I like to kind of rebrand brownfields as opportunity sites, because having a brownfield means you have an opportunity to get funding, like these EPA grants. The funding can help facilitate property transactions because a lot of banks require environmental assessments to be completed before they'll loan money on a property. And they allow you to get technical assistance and open up all kinds of redevelopment possibilities for a site. So the next slide just shows a couple of examples of brownfield opportunity site redevelopments right in Trinidad. So you guys have done an amazing job on several properties there already, so these aren't new concepts to you. The top one is your Space to Create project, and the bottom one is the La Puerta site that the city spent some of their existing EPA Brownfield grant money to help do some assessments and help move that redevelopment forward. So the next slide, we talk about the fact that the city and coalition partners obtained one of these EPA grants back in 2015. So Trinidad formed a partnership with the town of Aguilar and Los Animas County and received a $500,000 EPA Brownfield assessment grant back in October of 2015. So that those funds can be used for environmental assessments, just taking samples and getting the feel for what contamination might be there. And it was used throughout Los Animas County, and the funds are just about spent now. And on the next slide, you'll see a couple of properties where the city and the coalition partners have spent some of that 2015 funding, like the Fox Theater, where the coalition did a phase 1 environmental site assessment to get an understanding of the background, the history of use of the site. And then we did a building materials survey so we could get a feel for how much asbestos and lead-based paint and other hazardous materials might be in the building that need to be dealt with so that it can be redeveloped. Also used funds on the La Puerta redevelopment site, as I mentioned. On the next slide, you'll see a building, a really pretty historic building on Pine Street, where we've done environmental assessment work using the 2015 grant, and the East Street School building, where we did a phase 1 and are planning to do building materials survey, asbestos and lead paint survey there as well, with the last bit of the 2015 funding. The next slide shows that we also were able to use the funding in Aguilar rather than do a site-specific kind of environmental assessment. We worked with some experts in economic development, and they helped Aguilar put together a redevelopment roadmap. That's something that you can use these brownfield grant funds for if you can frame it in the context of a brownfield impacted area, which, you know, Main Street in Aguilar is largely vacant, and there's some unknowns. There's probably some asbestos and lead and that kind of stuff. So this was an eligible cost for the grant. And we were also able to get a market analysis for all of Los Animas County to kind of help understand if you're going to redevelop a brownfield, what is a feasible reuse. And we use some of the money on the county courthouse to do some asbestos assessment there and out at the airport. So in 2020, now what we plan to do is submit applications, 2 EPA Brownfield grant applications, one to essentially get the same kind of funding that you're just using up now, the Coalition Assessment Grant funding, and also a site-specific grant to do cleanup work at the Fox West Theater. The Coalition Brownfield Assessment Grant, it will be the same coalition. It'll be Trinidad and Aguilar and the county. It'll be for properties throughout the county. And the coalition actually has kind of a waiting list of property owners who are interested in taking advantage of the funding, but it's running out. So some properties are already kind of in the queue. We'll be applying for the full $600,000. That's the max that you can apply for as a coalition. There's no match required for this type of grant, and it's a 3-year grant term, but they allow extensions. If you're making good progress, sometimes it's really hard to spend the money in 3 years. And again, they're for assessment work, environmental assessments and sampling, and you can do planning work with them, but you can't do actual cleanup. There are other funds available both at the state and federal level for cleanup. So this one just covers assessment. And then the other grant that we'll be submitting this year is the cleanup grant for the Fox West Theater. And it's to deal with asbestos and lead paint. So I took some of these images from the Fox West Theater's website because I just think they're such an incredible show of the history of this theater. It was built in 1908 with bricks that were made in Trinidad. It's been vacant since 2013, and then the city purchased it. I think I have 2019 on here, but it might have been December 2018, so late 2018, early 2019. And the city is partnering with the Fox West Theater Alliance to do fundraising and planning to get it back up and running. And I recommend, if you haven't, which you probably all have, go to this foxwesttheater.com. They have a lot of historical information and photos. It's a really cool website. Back in 2016, the project partners did a community survey to kind of gauge the level of support of doing rehab work on the Fox Theater, and 89% of the 200 respondents surveyed said that the theater was very important to Trinidad's future. So I'm going to use that in the grant application to demonstrate how strongly the community supports this project. The EPA Brownfield Cleanup Grant will be used, as I said, to clean up asbestos and lead paint. And we'll also, before we're able to do the asbestos and lead paint cleanup, we'll have to clean up some of the mess that's in there that has been made by birds coming, infesting the building. And so we need to get access to these building materials. So the grant should pay for that as well. The city earlier this year applied for a grant from CDPAG to do some of this cleanup and secured a $108,000 cleanup grant, which is fantastic. It's not enough to cover all of the abatement that has to happen. So what we're going to do is use a portion of it as the match requirement for the EPA Brownfield grant. So we'll do a portion of the work as soon as possible, and then if the EPA grant is funded, we'll be able to use the remainder as a match. There's a 20% match requirement, and we anticipate that this grant application is going to be, the max you can ask for is $500,000. We anticipate it'll be about $400,000, so about an $80,000 match. So the CDPAG will help with a portion of that, and the rest can be made up however the city wants, and we plan to do some in-kind as well, so the city's time and spent on the project will be donated as an in-kind portion of the share. So in terms of timing, the CDPHE grant funded cleanup will be happening this winter, hopefully before it gets too cold. We're trying to get things moving. So the winter of 2020 and 2021. And the EPA grant, so the grant gets submitted October 28th this year, and then they spend months and months reading and scoring all these grant applications, and they make announcements in about May or June of next year about who has been successful, and then that money becomes available in October of 2021. So that's when that work would start. It would start, likely a couple months after the funding comes through. So again, it would be the winter spanning late 2021, early 2022. On the next slide, you'll see web addresses for spots on the city's website where we've saved the draft, what's called an Abca, an analysis of brownfield cleanup alternatives. It's just a document that the EPA requires that you have when you're going to apply for a cleanup grant, and it goes through the options for, what are the pros and cons of, different cleanup options, and kind of helps you choose, how comprehensive of a cleanup to do. So that is in draft form available on the city's website. If you're interested in looking at that, we'll be submitting that with the application. And then the draft grant application is also available online if you're interested in looking at that. So we ask that if you have any input on plans for the Fox Theater or plans for the cleanup, that you could let Georgie know by October 27th at the latest. We'll probably submit the grant on the 27th. If not, the 28th is when it's due, but it'd be nice to be a little bit early with it. So provide any input to Georgie as soon as possible, and we'll see if we can, take your comments and your ideas into consideration when preparing the grant and forming the reuse plans. So that's kind of the bulk of what we wanted to share. So I don't know if any questions have come up because I can't see the Q&A box, but I'll let Georgie kind of let me know if there's anything I can answer.
Okay, let me see if I can get that here. I don't see any questions in the chat box. Maybe we can unmute everyone, and since there's not too many of us.
Sounds good.
Okay, so I guess everybody's unmuted.
Go ahead.
Georgie?
I'm good.
Georgie, I have a quick question.
Okay, yes, please.
I just want to know how long they expect the work this winter to go once it gets started.
How long it will take?
Yeah, the work that they're starting this winter with the CDPHE grant.
Carrie, do you know about how long the contractor would be working in there?
Yeah, I think you could count on it being something in the neighborhood of 3 to 4 weeks. This first round of work will be focusing on kind of the front of the first floor, so the retail areas and the lobby and the bathrooms, so that those areas can be reactivated for use and be income generating. And Stephanie, I think you're on. You can please feel free to jump in and talk about that if you like. But so it's not a huge effort. So I think 3 to 4 weeks is probably about in the ballpark for this first round of work.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Carrie, this is Stephanie. And I'm hesitating to say. question. I'm sorry. And
Stephanie, I think you're cutting in and out a little bit, so if you'll repeat that.
I was just saying I'm having connection issues.
Oh,
I can relate.
it seems to be catching.
Yeah.
Did anybody have any questions or comments on this project that they wanted to mention?
So, Carrie, this is Mike. How competitive is this grant that we're going for?
So, it's kind of interesting. Like I mentioned, those multi-purpose grants that they only give 10 of per year, it sounds like they should be vastly more competitive, but they don't get as many applications for those. So, the odds are roughly the same for each kind, but Ted Lanzano, who is the EPA project officer, who Georgie has been working with on the existing grant for years, he has always said that cleanup grants are the least competitive of the grants. And I think if you have a compelling story, that just makes a huge difference. And I think with Trinidad's momentum with the arts industry and the arts community, and support by urban neighborhoods and Dana Crawford and Stephanie, and just the size and the history of the theater, I think it's a very competitive application. So I'm optimistic. I hesitate to say that. I don't want to make any guarantees, but I think the cleanup grant is probably, the least thing to be worried about. I think, the community-wide assessment grant, the other grant application that we're planning to submit this year, it's really strong too. I mean, you guys have done such great things with the existing grant that makes a huge difference to know that you've achieved goals with their funding before and can do it again. So I think that one's really strong too, but if I had to put them in order of strength, I'd put the cleanup grant probably first.
Carrie, excuse me, as a follow-up to that question, what kind of input would you be wanting to receive by the 27th so we could spread the word if there's anything in particular that you need?
If you have any concerns about cleanup, about safety, because we will plan, of course, to have signage and, keep people out of the buildings and that kind of thing. But if there's any concern about safety, that's something that you might want to convey. If there's any interest, in talking about your specific ideas for how the building can be reused, what kind of activities and shows you'd like to see there, you think would benefit the community, and those kinds of things would be useful as well. So, there's it's hard for folks to comment on the technical side on the cleanup kind of approach because it is what it is. But if there is anything of interest to you in the cleanup, the technical side, safety, that kind of thing, and then on the other side, sort of the plans, the long-term plans for reuse.
Okay.
EPA is interested in hearing those things.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
I'm gonna ask Victor to unmute everyone, and we'll see if anybody has any other questions.
I had a question. This is John Norris speaking.
Okay.
It was if we were looking for a purpose for the theater, the Fox Theater, I find it strange that there's not a representative from the Southern Colorado Repertory Theater, SCRT.
Jonathan, I think we do have plans for the theater. They're all in the works, and maybe Stephanie could speak a little bit more to that. But what we're looking for is if you have thoughts you want to submit to the theater.
Okay.
Stephanie, did you have anything you wanted to comment on the
No, I'm
use?
good. I'm good.
Yeah, EPA likes to know that that public funds are used for things that the public is in support of. So, supportive comments are welcome too, for sure. But they just want to make sure that with public funds, people don't just have projects going on in their community that they have no ability to comment on, either pro or anti. So that's kind of the idea with EPA. It's just that since it's public money, we want everyone to have a voice.
I'm not sure if Stephanie's having trouble, but I think the live theater is something that's definitely in the plans for the Fox Theater. They hope to have symphony performances, theater performances of different kinds, and there'll also be space available for community use. When the project is all finished, and the ballroom downstairs will be available. And Mike, I don't know if you have some other comments, additional comments with that.
Yeah, no, I do not. That's the long-term goal. Stephanie says, I'm sorry, I'm trying to comment, but I don't think you can hear me. She's chatted in. I'm not sure why our connection is so bad.
Yeah. From our end, the mic is unmuted.
Yeah, but the long-term goal is to reactivate that space to its former glory and have all kinds of different venues and shows in there. So more toward the live theater than what has been used for in the past with movies and such. Back to the live theater instead of a movie theater.
The city sees the Fox Theater as a key catalyst site in our historic district. It's one of the first buildings you come by when you come in on Main Street, and it leads into our downtown area. So we feel it's really important to get this vacant building back to its former glory, like Mike said. I think it'll be a big benefit for heritage tourism and further economic development. So I think that's where the city has been behind the Fox Theater. But I guess if we don't have any other comments or questions, we can wrap this meeting up. Anyone? Okay, well, I sure appreciate all of you joining in on this meeting tonight. We will keep you informed. We hope we'll get awarded this grant, and we'll be moving along.
Thank you.
And thank you, Carrie. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Carrie.
Yeah.
Thank you, Georgie and Mike.
Yeah, thank you.
This conference